So I guess the first step is to explain what Child Protection Services and the Department of Family and Children's Services actually is. It's an agency that falls under the Department of Health and Human Services, today the Department of Human Services. As an agency, Child Protection Services and Department of Family and Children's Services, again, depending on what state you happen to be in, couldn't exist on its own. Without being attached to the agency called Department of Human Services, it would be an unconstitutional body because of the way in which it works. The other misnomer about these two agencies is that they're for the protection and welfare of families and children. If you look at the historical record of these two agencies, your child, any child, is more likely to be harmed or become deceased, die, in the care of Child Protection Services than they are in an abusive home. That should make people ask questions. And I'm very, very disturbed that nobody has. Under the auspices of the Child Protection and Department of Family Services, Family and Children's Services, children have died. Children under the ages of 8, hundreds in one state alone, Oregon, thousands across the country. Children under the age of 8 have been listed as runaways under the care and supervision of Child Protection Services. And nobody's in jail. If I lost my 8-year-old, let alone 4-month, 6-month, 8-month-old child, I would be in prison, especially if I couldn't tell you what happened to him. Yet, Child Protection Services does this on a regular basis. Now, after doing some research, I would advise any parent who's adopted a child through an adoption agency and had to pay an exorbitant price, $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, to go through the records of Child Protection Services and Department of Family and Children's Services and see if your child's photograph isn't one of the children that's missing from that agency. Because we know for a fact in Texas, children have been taken into Arizona and adopted out, and they're listed as missing, runaways. That's a fact. Child Protection Services in Texas adopted children into Arizona and California, but they're listed as runaways on their website and in their paperwork, and nobody's in jail. Here again, we go back to the immunity issue. If you can commit perjury and fraud in court and can't be prosecuted for it, and you're protected by the attorneys general in every state, that should worry people as well. You know, the attorney generals in every state are the single highest ranking member of law enforcement that we have to protect us from abuses. But what we have is attorneys general who are turning blind eyes to illegal activities that fall under the Racketeering Act, federal crimes that are being done on a regular basis as a matter of policy by a federally funded agency within their states. They are aware of the perjury, they're aware of the kidnapping, they're aware of the abuses of the Fourth Amendment, which probably I should explain. No police officer or federal or state agency can come into your home without a warrant. Yet CPS somehow has convinced law enforcement agencies that they have the authority to do so, and in doing so, the law enforcement agencies themselves are breaking the law. And our state attorneys general in all 50 states know that this is the case. They know that this is the way it's being done. And they're sitting in their offices and telling me, when I asked, and telling parents that they can do nothing, it's outside their authority. If they're the highest law enforcement authority in our states, and they can't keep an agency from breaking the law on a regular basis, don't you think we need a higher agency and a higher authority? Well, I've asked the federal attorney general, several other people have as well, and they've said that they can't do anything either. Wrong. They have the authority to make the changes that are necessary. So do our senators and congressmen. Yet they don't do it. And that's probably the most important thing that people need to understand, is they know that this problem exists. They created it. When they said that we were going to finance adoptions and supervised guardianship, but we're not going to give equal funding for restoration of families and reunification, they created the problem. And for some reason they refuse to fix it, even though the laws are being broken continuously. No other court, no other system in the country has immunity from perjury or for criminal activity such as we see in child protection services in the family court system. None. If a judge in a criminal court was found to have been conspiratorial and allowed fraudulent statements and perjury to occur and did nothing about it, that judge would be removed from the bench. Not so in family court system. If an attorney encouraged a client, such as child protection service agents, to commit perjury and fraud being entering into court records things that are untrue, that attorney would be disbarred. If I went into court, I would be in jail if I committed perjury or fraud. Yet these people, for some reason, gave themselves immunity in violation of our Constitution, in violation of law, in violation of protocol. So why would they need to do that if they were legitimate, if they acted in legitimate ways? You wouldn't need immunity from perjury and slander and fraud and conspiracy. You know, in the first 24 to 72 hours of a case, CPS caseworkers have committed kidnapping. They've broken the Fourth Amendment because they've taken the child without a warrant. They've entered your home without a warrant. They've committed extortion because now they have your child and they're going to extort their demands from you. Coercion, fraud, perjury when they entered the records into court the next day or the day after. And they're not in jail.